Welcome to the third episode of Anti-Aging Hacks. Today, we discuss the importance of omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids, the best sources for these fats, and why frying anything in oil is so bad for you, and how to have stable energy all day. Welcome to Anti-Aging Hacks. On this podcast, I interview top experts in anti-aging and longevity, and we discuss the best natural and medical solutions to bring you practical advice you can apply right now to fight back against aging. We also discuss sneak peeks at some huge scientific advancements coming in the near future that will allow us to age backwards. I am your host, Faraz Khan. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Dr. Udo Erasmus, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
So Dr. Udo Erasmus is the co-owner of the Udo's CHOICE brand, a global leader in cutting-edge health products, as well as an accomplished author, including Fats and Oils, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill, that has sold over 250,000 copies worldwide. Dr. Erasmus has impacted over 5 million lives by passionately conducting 5,000 plus live presentations, 3,000 plus media interviews, 1,500 staff trainings, and traveled to 40 plus countries with his message on how to achieve perfect health. So, Dr. Erasmus, to kick us off, for the listeners that don't know you, would you please give them a quick backstory on yourself and how you got into oils?
Mm-hmm. Well, the backstory on oils is that I studied biological sciences because I wanted to know what health is, and I actually took a year of medicine. And we only learned about disease. And we were also told that a doctor should sound as though he should always sound as though he knows what's going on, even when he doesn't. Mm-hmm. We call that lying on the farm. And I didn't want to spend my life lying to people. So I went back into biological science, ended up in biochemistry and genetics. So I have a very good background in the biological sciences. And then I left university and I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I took a lot of different labor jobs like logging and mining and farming and just all kinds of different jobs. And in the process of it, I got a job in a gardening company and took a license to become a pesticide sprayer as part of the job. And then my marriage broke up and I wanted to kill something. So I took a full-time job as a pesticide sprayer. Wow. And I was really careless and eventually, after 3 years, got poisoned by the pesticides I sprayed.
Wow.
You know, it's a predictable outcome, right? Mm-hmm. It's called karma, or what you sow, you reap. Mm-hmm. And then I went to the doctor and I said, what do you have for pesticide poisoning? And the answer was nothing. And that day, the penny dropped for me that my health really is my responsibility. And I began to think about what it takes to take care of your health. Because if you don't take care of it, maybe nobody else cares about it either. Mm-hmm. And the doctor gets paid whether you get cured or not. So there's no incentive for the doctor to make sure that you're healthy. So it really is your own personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And so then I went into the research literature and looked at health and nutrition, disease and nutrition, because the idea was body's made out of food. It's actually made out of food, water, and air, but I was thinking food, which is complicated. And body's made out of food. And I knew that every year, 98% of the atoms in the human body are removed and replaced. And you don't even notice, but every year, 98% of your body completely turns over.
Wow.
And if you raise your standard for nutrition, because you don't like your state of health, you want a better state of health. If you raise your standard for what you put into the body, to make it out of, in 1 year, you can have rebuilt your body, 98% of your body, to a higher standard. And there's why healing is possible, is because the body keeps being rebuilt, turned over and rebuilt. So you raise the standard, then you raise the state of your body. You raise your level of physical health. And so that to me was very interesting. And I got stuck on fats because of all of the nutrients. Fats are most essential, are the least well understood, are the most confusing, are the most misrepresented, and are the most misused. Because these are our most sensitive nutrients that should get the most care, and we give them the least care. So I developed a method for making oils with health in mind, and then out of that came flaxseed oil as my first oil, and then a blend that is better balanced than flax oil, which is called Udo's oil. So that's basically how I got there. And then I got into digestion, then I got into greens, and then I got into, what else affects health? Which the answer is everything, and we'll get to that later on.
Got it. It's fascinating to me every time I hear that story. And a question I have wondered is that if we do get in a situation where there's damage to the body, such as pesticides in your case, when we reverse those conditions and start eating right and change our lifestyle to avoid those pollutants, is our body able to heal herself completely?
It depends on how long you wait, and depends on how severely you do it. Because obviously, if you do it too severely, you die. Your body dies. So there are limits to that. But generally speaking, if because your body rebuilds itself 98% every year, you can rebuild it 98% every year. There are some things that tend to linger, but we have detox mechanisms that are natural to the body. One is through your bowels, that strips the inside of your digestive tract on a continuing basis. One is through your kidneys. One is through your liver and then your bowel. One is through your breath. That's for anything that's volatile, that can evaporate. And the one that probably is the least used these days is sweating. Because sweating, and when people did everything by hand, they pretty much sweated every day. And sweating, you get rid of toxins. Water soluble toxins will come out of your body in the water part of your sweat, and even oil soluble toxins, which are more of an issue because they're harder to get out through the other detox mechanisms. If you take extra oil, it has to be oil that's not damaged, because otherwise you're putting more toxins in your body. But if it's oil that's not damaged, then you can sweat out oil soluble toxins, and they will come out of your body in the oil part of your sweat. And that's been measured. Both the Agent Orange, this is what the studies were done on. Agent Orange, they measured it in the sweat, and they were able to monitor its decrease in the body. So sweating is very powerful detox. And the worst thing that can happen when you sweat is you get a rash or something like that, short term. But if you drive these toxins through your liver and your kidneys, you can damage those organs. So sweating is really the most preferable way to detox.
Wow.
Of all of the detox methods.
That is great to hear. I have been doing more and more sauna over the last year, and I just love how I feel after and the benefits to my skin. So on the topics of oils, I'm sure everybody's heard about omega-3s and omega-6 fats and why they're important to us. So would you please explain, one, why they're called essential fatty acids and why they're so important to our body?
Right. Well, omega-3 and omega-6 are called essential fatty acids because these are molecules the body cannot make but has to have for you to be healthy. Because it can't make them from anything else, they have to come in from outside. If you don't get enough, your health goes down and you get deficiency symptoms. They are degenerative in nature. They get worse with time. And if you don't get enough of any essential nutrient long enough, you die. So this is like the most important building blocks that life needs to make you a body that works. And they include 18 minerals, 13 vitamins, 8 amino acids, and 2 essential fatty acids. And the third part of the definition is if your health is going down because you're not getting enough of any essential nutrient, if you bring adequate amounts of that essential nutrient back into the diet before you die, because death by definition is not reversible, right? But if you do it before you die, then all of the symptoms that come from not getting enough are reversed and you get your health back. And that's because life knows exactly through your genetic program that you have how to build you a body that works, provided you take responsibility. And this is the only responsibility you need to take for all of this. You make sure that you bring in enough of all of the essential nutrients, all of the essential building blocks that life needs to do that job. That's actually your only place where you have any responsibility. Once they're in there, then it's automatic. It's all automatic. Life takes care of it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to figure out how to do digestion. You don't have to figure out how to do absorption. You don't have to figure out how a molecule of an essential nutrient like omega-3, ends up in your toe, in the membrane of a cell that needs that. Life figures all of that out. You don't have to think about it. So that's what essential means. And this is the foundation of why nutrition is important to physical health.
That is fascinating. So what are the typical symptoms you just mentioned if somebody does not have enough omega-3 or omega-6s in their diet?
The short answer is everything falls apart, because the omega-6 and omega-3 are required by every cell in the membranes. They make the cell receptors that govern what goes in and out of cells work more effectively. And you get dry skin, you get low energy levels, you can get high, if you're not eating fats, then you can get high blood pressure, high cholesterol, your platelets might become stickier. So there are lots. You get more inflammation, especially when you don't have enough omega-3s. And inflammation is behind most of our degenerative conditions, or at least many of the major degenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and atherosclerosis and the arthritic diseases. And, but there's a small problem, because you can get some of those symptoms from deficiency of other nutrients as well. So the way that works is omega-3s will reverse every symptom that comes from omega-3 deficiency, but it will not reverse any symptoms that come from magnesium deficiency, or, because you need magnesium for that, or vitamin C deficiency. You need vitamin C for that. So it's very specific, and some of the symptoms overlap. So if you take omega-3s and some of your symptoms go away, that's because they were symptoms of omega-3 deficiency. And if some symptoms don't go away, then that's because they have another cause. And if some of the symptom goes away, but not all of it, then it means you probably need not only omega-3s, but something else is also too low in your diet.
That's very interesting. I know that we're getting a lot more omega-6 in the Western diet than omega-3s. Some reports say we are even getting up to a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. In your opinion, what is the right ratio of these fatty acids, and what happens if we're out of balance?
Well, okay, let me start by saying there are different opinions on what is the best ratio. Some people say it's about 4 times more omega-6 than omega-3. And they call that the perfect ratio. Some people say it's 1-to-1. In the brain, omega-3 and omega-6 is about 1-to-1. And they call it the historical ratio. And both of those don't make sense in practice. The historical ratio was not 1-to-1, because if you were in the North Country, because omega-3s are more common in the North, closer to the North and South poles, you had a lot of omega-3s in the diet, because in cold climate, they are warming oils, and they increase metabolic rate and increase oxygen consumption. And so they're important in places where it gets cold. So there's more of them in the diet than omega-6. If you go further south, you end up where there's more omega-6. That's where most of us live. If you go further south from there, you get into Mediterranean, you get more omega-9s. Those are not essential. And you get less omega-6 and less omega-3. And if you get into the tropics, you have more saturated fats and very little bit, only a very, very small amount of omega-3 and omega-6. So the ratio changes as you go from north to the equator, and from the equator south to the pole. So historical ratio is BS. I've been working with oils now for about 38 years. And we work with people in the field, not in a lab. We're not doing artificial situations. We're looking at lifestyles and what's the best ratio. We have consistently got the best results when the ratio is twice as much omega-3 as omega-6. And that also gives you some leeway for other oils you might have in the diet. But if you start getting symptoms of deficiency, then you want to go back to more exclusively using the 2-to-1 ratio, because omega-3s are the single most widespread essential nutrient deficiency of our time. 99% of the population doesn't get enough. Every cell needs them. There's a ton of symptoms that are improved when you get more omega-3s. So they're like the magic. They're like the magic ingredient of our time, the magic physical essential ingredient of our time.
One more background question for the listeners. In talking about omega-3 fatty acids, they may have heard of ALA, EPA, and DHA. Where do these fatty acids come from, and can we manufacture some of them from others?
Yeah. So the way that goes is the ALA, which is a plant-based omega-3, 18 carbons, 3 double bonds. That's all pretty technical. That's the essential omega-3 fatty acid. EPA and DHA can be made in the body from ALA. Even though in the marketplace, the people who sell fish oil, which contains EPA and DHA, they say, oh, the body cannot convert. Well, that's just turf protection. That's actually not true. And there's lots of research that shows the body converts to different degrees, different studies. A lot of those studies were done very poorly because they measured labeled ALA and its conversion to DHA, but left out the fact that the body has 3 to 10 or 12 times more ALA already in the body that's not labeled, that is also available for conversion, but that doesn't get measured because it wasn't labeled. And so the research now says that we've been underestimating the body's ability to convert ALA into EPA and DHA and all kinds of other molecules that they're converted into by at least 3 times. And and when people get their grants to do research from the fish oil industry, they tend to put in a good word for the fish oil industry. And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the arena. I've been in it for a long time. I hear all the stories, and I know how it works. And so there's a lot of BS. I actually don't use any EPA and DHA, and I do that on purpose just to show that the body can convert. And the proof, I think, is 300 million Hindus are Brahmins. Brahmins are vegetarians. The only animal product they use is clabbered milk for probiotics mainly. And milk is notoriously low in EPA and DHA. So they're getting ALA from their plant foods. But and if they didn't get enough DHA, they would have problems seeing because they're important in vision. Their brain wouldn't work that well because half of the essential fatty acid derivatives in the brain are omega-3. It's quite a lot. So they wouldn't be able to think well. And in sperm, there's a lot of DHA, and they wouldn't be able to reproduce well. Well, the Brahmins have no problems in any of those 3 areas. And this is an experiment that's been going on for like 20,000 years in India. So, but what we find out too is that there are many herbs and spices, or several herbs and spices at least, that speed up the conversion of ALA to the derivatives. And those happen to be also very, very good. Like the one that's got the most attention is turmeric. Turmeric is in curry. India is famous for curry, right? And so they're getting alpha-linolenic acid in their diet, and curry helps to convert that into EPA and DHA whenever it's needed. Right. But the fish oil industry has always said the body can't convert, and is simply plant protection, and it's actually not true. Now, the other problem with the fish oils is they are so damaged now, and they're so damaged by the processing. Like the cooking oils are damaged by processing to about 0.5 to 1%. For the fish oils, it can be 5 to 10%. And when they concentrate the fish oils, the damaged molecules get concentrated along with the omega-3 derivatives. Not, so I don't recommend fish oil at all, have never have, because of the damage done to it by processing. If you get oils made with health in mind and you get enough ALA that's undamaged in that oil, then everything that the body makes from it, there's like hundreds of molecules. And they're not even all known yet. The body does all kinds of things with these oils, extends them, lengthens them for brain function, for immune function, even endocannabinoids, which make you feel good. It's like what you get when you smoke marijuana or when you take THC. The body makes endocannabinoids out of reacting DHA, the derivative made from ALA, the essential fatty acid, with protein, and you get endocannabinoids, and they occupy the same sites that THC occupies, and they make you feel good. And omega-3s can be very helpful in improving mood and elevating mood and lifting depression.
Got it. So you've gone pretty much mostly vegetarian. At dinner the other night, I ordered a salad with some tuna.
Yeah.
And on seeing you only eat your salad with no meat or tuna, I ended up eating only half my tuna and left the rest on the plate.
Yeah, I saw that.
On the note of being vegetarian, why have you done it, and what benefits do you see from going mostly vegetarian?
Well, I didn't start out vegetarian. When we were kids, we lived on a farm without electricity. We had a huge garden. And we only ate meat once a week because my father would have to drive 15 miles into town where there was a locker, a freezer, and he'd have a quarter of beef in the freezer cut up into pieces. And every Friday he'd go in and get one piece and bring it home, and we'd eat that on the weekend because we didn't have refrigeration, right? But we had a huge garden, so vegetables was not a problem. We had a root cellar, so keeping vegetables in winter was not a problem. And so we ate fairly simply, wasn't fancy gourmet. My mother was like potatoes and carrots and beets and, radishes and all that stuff, salads. And so we were not ever huge meat eaters. But then I got into the city and got into university and did, spent time in so-called civilized society and started eating like everybody else. And the first time I took a tour to talk about oils, we did it in a van without air conditioning. And we didn't have refrigeration there, and we slept in the van. I slept on the floor. My driver had built himself a bunk bed across the back. And we noticed, we went to 85 cities in 101 days, 35 states, 17,000 miles by road, and literally worked all day and then drove all night. And we found out within the first 2 weeks that if we ate carbs, we'd almost fall asleep at the wheel. And if we ate meat, we felt heavy. And so we went on a completely raw food diet, because you could just put a cabbage in the van, and the cabbage would sit around. It might dry out a little bit, but it wouldn't rot or anything. So we ate all just basically raw plant food for 101 minus 14 days. And we had energy to burn. We had more energy than we ever had eating meat and eating vegetables. So I think that was really my first pass at a plant-based diet. And that was in 1988. So we're talking, 31 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So a long time ago. And over the years, as I've gotten older, I've noticed that I do better on plants, and I do very well on raw food. And it takes, maybe for people who are not used to it, it takes time to get used to it. And I do it because I'm just listening to what my body's telling me. It happens to also be good for the environment in terms of oxygen production and methane production or oxygen depletion and methane production and a number of other grasses where there could be trees and all of that. So there's ways in which that's also good for the environment. But I didn't do it from that point of view. I did it because I feel better on it. And I'm paying attention. As I get older, maybe I'm more sensitive than I used to be, or maybe I pay more attention than I used to. I like being present in my life and paying attention to what's going on. And the research is now very clear that if you want the longest and the healthiest life, you go on a whole food, plant-based diet, and you take vitamin B12 as a supplement, because vitamin B12 comes from animals. So we're not vegan by nature, but the old people, 10,000 years ago, we were not hunter-gatherers. We were gatherers and sometime hunters, because they had rocks to hunt with, and they came home without meat a lot. Right. So when you come home without meat, what do? You eat plants. Why? Because they don't run away and they don't fight back, and they're really easy to hunt down and kill. Right? So we were more gatherer hunters than hunter-gatherers in most places. That's not true for all places, but it's true for most places.
That is absolutely true. And I've switched over in the last year or two to eating at least 70% plant-based foods in my diet. And I've seen a lot of benefits from that, including stable energy. The other reason that I love, and we're switching over to fats for a second, out of the three macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats cause the least impact on the insulin levels. And for somebody like myself who wants to live longer and healthier, keeping insulin levels low is absolutely essential. So plants are very good at that, as well as fats. So how much fats would you recommend in an average person's daily diet?
We recommend, just to optimize omega-3 and 6, we recommend a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day of Udo's oil, which is the blend, which is about 45% omega-3 and about half of that omega-6. And there's the 2-to-1 ratio. And they're made with health in mind, and they're in glass, so you don't have plastic leaching into oil, which is also not good for the body. So we recommend a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day, which means 2 to 4 tablespoons for most people. That gets you the essential fatty acids. Everything else is optional after that, because omega-9 and saturated fats, your body can make those out of sugar and starch. And I would recommend seeds and nuts for most of the other fats. There is fat in all foods, all whole foods, but in green vegetables and fruit, it's 0.1%. In grains, it's 2 to 4%. In beans, it's 2 to 4%, except for soybeans have a higher fat content. And then you're looking at seeds and nuts; they're anywhere from 25 to 65% fat.
I eat plenty of seeds and nuts. And full disclosure, I have also been eating your Udo's oil every day just to make sure I get my omegas and enough fats. When you talk about the bad practices the oil industry uses to prep and package the oils into bottles and containers, how bad is it really?
Well, when I found out how much damage is done by oils when industry makes them with shelf life in mind, and the way they do that is they treat it with Drano, which is sodium hydroxide, very corrosive base, then with phosphoric acid, which is a very corrosive acid. Then they bleach them, and that makes them rancid, and then they clean up the rancidity by heating those oils to frying temperature. In other words, those oils have been fried before they go in the bottle, before you buy them, before you take them home and fry them some more. And in that process, 0.5 to 1% of the molecules are damaged, turned from something that exists in nature, that life made a program to break down, to something that never existed in nature. So life maybe never made a program for breaking them down. And if you have a tablespoon of an oil that is 1% damaged by the processing, guess how many damaged molecules you'd get from that tablespoon? And I ask people that, and they always underestimate by up to 1 billion or more times how much damage done to the oil. Even if it's only 1% damaged, then a tablespoon isn't like a lot, right? There are 50 quintillion damaged molecules in that tablespoon if it's 1% damaged. 50 quintillion is enough to get you more than 1 million damaged molecules for every one of your body's 60 trillion cells. You eat 2 to 4 tablespoons, you got to multiply that in. And then if you go use that oil and fry your foods in it, light, oxygen, and heat damage these oils all at the same time in your frying pan. And so, you don't kill yourself on 1 tablespoon of damaged oil, but you do that every day for like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And then you have cancer and say, gee, I always ate well. I always thought I did what I could. And maybe you did some good things, but you didn't know how many damaged molecules you were intentionally, deliberately introducing into your body that interfere with life's job of building you a body. It needs natural molecules to do that. That's why it's best to eat your foods in their natural state, and why frying is the single worst thing we've ever invented to do to our foods. Fried foods, fry health. Fried oils, fry health. And more health problems, physical health problems, come from damaged oils than any other part of nutrition. And that means making the change to oils made with health in mind will do more for physical health than any other change you might make in nutrition. They are worse than sugar. Sugar is bad. This is worse. And the third problem would be too much animal-based foods from a health perspective.
So let's talk about that subject a little more, of heating oils. Over the last year and a half, personally, I've stopped frying most of my foods. I eat my veggies cold, or I boil them in water. Sometimes, though, I do cook my eggs in coconut oil or butter. For some folks that like to saute their veggies or cook their foods in oil or cook eggs or a burger, would you recommend that at all? Or do you recommend not cooking in oils at all?
See, now you're playing Russian roulette. I love it, because I just said, frying is absolutely the most damaging thing we ever do. Doesn't matter what you use. It's worst if you use omega-3s. It's less bad when you use saturated fats, but you're still frying it and it'll still fry your health. So the next question I always get, well, what if I have to cook or saute or fry, or can I do it gently, or is there any oil that I can use? And, and that's like, well, why don't you ask a better question? What would I need to do in order to have the longest, healthiest life possible, given my genetic makeup? That's a really good question. Your question is like, it's a what can I get away with question. You don't get away with anything. Every damaged molecule you introduce into the body interferes in wherever it is, interferes with some molecular thing going on. You may not be able to measure it. And so people will say, it's okay to do a little bit of that. But then it piles up on you and starts the process of tearing down your body. That basically makes people die 20 years before they would have to, if they lived in line with the requirements of their life and their genetic program.
Wow.
So what I say to people is, what oil is good for frying? I say water. 20 years ago, there was no big oil industry. There were some oils, but there wasn't a big oil industry. Most cooking was done in water. But nature's mandate for every creature on the planet is fresh, whole, raw, organic, raw, the way it's made in nature. In other words, you should be punching a hole in the eggs on one side and the other and suck out the raw egg. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But and we actually, some people do that, and that's how a fox will eat eggs if it is lucky enough to get one. They don't eat many of them. We overdo eggs. There are not negative side effects to it. And here's the thing: if you want to not eat the egg raw, but you can't fry it because Udo says no, you can still soft boil it, hard boil it, water scramble it, poach it. You don't need oil to do eggs.
All right. Looks like I'm going to change up how I eat my eggs from now on. I will say this. You are 76 years old, Dr. Erasmus, and you have amazing hair and great skin. You are lean. You're fit. What is your secret to looking this good?
Well, honestly, for skin, the oil is probably the single best thing. And the way that goes is, if your skin is dry, you need more oil. In winter, skin gets dry more than in summer because you burn more oil for heat. So you need more oil in winter than in summer. I use about 4 tablespoons in winter, and I use 2 or 3 in summer to get my skin to feel soft and velvety. When you take optimum amount of oil, about 20% of it ends up in your skin. And when you get 20% of your oil in your skin, it makes your oil soft and velvety. It is the moisturizer from inside. Best way to oil your skin is from within with essential fatty acids. And you need both omega-3 and omega-6 for that. So together, they form a barrier in the skin against the loss of moisture. So the skin, energy level, well, omega-3s are actually the energy horses in the body. So we did a study with athletes. We gave them Udo's oil for a month. After, we picked people who weren't paying attention to their oils. They were just eating whatever they were eating, and if they took drugs, they kept taking the drugs, whatever it was they're on. The only change we made for a month, a tablespoon per 50 pounds of body weight per day, mixed in their food, and the intake spread out over the course of the day. At the end of 30 days, we measured their performance to exhaustion, and it was 40 to 60% higher than it was before they started taking the oil. And then we took them off and watched their performance go down again. Then we put them on again, watched it go up again. Then we took them off again, watched them go down again. And then they all bolted because they liked their performance improvements and they wouldn't do the study anymore. But literally, we used them as their own controls and just changed it back and forth just to show 40 to 60% increase in energy. And the reason for it is the omega-3s increase energy. I said they keep you warm in cold climates. They're warming oils. The reason why is they attract oxygen into the body. They increase oxidation rate. They increase metabolic rate. And when you increase oxygen metabolism, it takes you longer to get tired. And once you get tired, it takes you shorter time to recover because you get tired from oxygen shortage. And you require oxygen to recover from oxygen shortage. And anything that improves the body's ability to absorb oxygen will increase stamina and speed recovery. They also told us that their injuries healed in a third to a half the time. We've had letters from professional athletes that said, "What drug are you putting in the oil?" And I would say, "I'm not putting any drug in the oil." And why are you asking that question? He said, because I've had shoulder injury from my football days, and it's always bothered me. But when I take the oil, when I started taking the oil, that pain disappeared. And I said, I noticed that when I go off the oil, the pain comes back. So I thought that since we always use drugs as painkillers, there must be a drug in the oil. No, the omega-3s do that because they also improve circulation. They relax arterial muscle tone, so your blood travels better, and that way your tissues become oxygenated more effectively. So they carry oxygen better, and they improve blood flow. So does magnesium. So do some other things. But these are properties of omega-3s as well. So what else? So that's for energy. Yeah, skin and energy level. Yeah. And honestly, when I was 38, I had arthritis in my knees, just a little bit, not huge. But when I bent my knees and put a little pressure on it, my knees hurt. And now I'm 76 and I don't have any pain in any of my joints. If I bang into something, I get pain, right? It's not like I don't get pain. But when I bang into something, I get pain just like anybody would. But it heals fast, and but I don't have chronic pain anywhere. And that has a lot to do with how I eat in line with nature. But and that's not a new thing either. There was a guy. What was
that is
his
amazing.
Name? Way back when, he ate all raw foods and juices and. I think he died on a crash from galloping a horse when he was 92, right? So there've been people like that in America, for a long time, but they were committed to living in line with nature.
Wow.
They weren't just going, whatever's most convenient. Life is too much anyway, so let me just do the easy thing. My view is that if you hear the word convenience, run like hell. Because convenience kills. Convenience breaks you down, right? The convenient life that everybody wants, because life is hard, is what people say, right? And challenge builds you and convenience breaks you down. So when you're always going for convenience, you're doing something that will shorten your life and shorten the quality of your life.
Since I've gone on your oil, it was about more than a year ago or so, I have seen stable energy myself and much improved skin. So I will include the links to the oils and your other products in the show notes. The other question I had is, I know you have a new book out. It's the book on total sexy health. Yep. What can you tell our listeners about that book?
Well, I'll tell you how that came to be. I was born during the Second World War. And so I got my nose rubbed into what happens when people don't live consciously. And I got that really early. So when I was 6 years old, I said, man, there must be a way that we can live beautifully on this planet. And I'm going to find out how. And what it turns out is that everything affects health. Everything affects health. Mm-hmm. Stress affects health, and your neighbors affect your health, and your government affects your health, and your religion affects your health, and what you think affects your health, and how you live in your environment affects your health, how you eat affects your health, how you feel inside about being alive affects your health, whether you're in touch with the energy that is your energy affects your health. So everything affects your health. And when I started with oils because it was the most neglected area. Then I went to digestion because I felt that was the second most neglected area. Then I went to greens because they're the foundation of everything on the planet. And I'm always thinking of how was it in nature before we started living out of line with nature. And so I worked with greens and then when I was traveling, I would give people really good advice. And then a lot of times these were people who knew as much or even more than I did because they went to everybody, every speaker took notes, copious notes. And, they were really into it, but they would never put anything in practice. They said, why is it why is it? I mean, probably everybody in America knows that there are things that if they put them in practice, they would have a better life. Mm-hmm. And they don't put them in practice. Why aren't people putting things in practice when they know? And so the conclusion I came to is that when people are not inspired, everything is too much work. And then they just live in their habit ruts because habits are ruts, right? And then climbing out of those ruts is really hard. And so they don't do it. And convenience is where they go. It's convenient to stay in your habit, and it takes a little energy to change a habit. So if they're not inspired. So I started thinking, well, you know what? As important as the information I give is that I have to also inspire them. Because when you get inspired, that lifts you out of your rut. Mm-hmm. And then it's not that difficult to make a change. And then if you notice that the change gives you a benefit, then you get addicted to the better life that you have. So then it's like you get a better rut because you can still create a habit. But if the habit is in line with nature, then it's okay. It's a better rut to be in. Mm-hmm. And so I started thinking about that. And then I started thinking about, well, what else affects health? And I was like, oh my God, everything affects health. So if you want to be really healthy, you have to give everything its due, not just food and fitness. But, and then now we know mindset, we know that affects health, but it's even broader than that. Your social surroundings, your natural surroundings, and probably the most neglected of all things is that we live outward into the world most of our life and do very little to live inward, because inward, that's where we get in touch with the energy we have. And when you are in touch with that energy, it energizes you. And that's where the awareness lives, and that's where your calmness is, and that's where your peace is, and that's where your contentment lives, and that's where your wisdom comes from, and that's where your inspiration is. You can literally get inspired by going to the place where in you the inspiration always is, because it's part of your nature. And so the book on total sexy health, the 8 key parts designed by nature, is about looking at each of these 8 areas: internal awareness, life energy, inspired creativity, physical body, survival smarts, social group, and then nature, planet, solar system, and then big picture. A big picture is, being a little creature in a terminal body in an infinite universe, and being okay with that, and being conscious of that in a very relaxed fashion. And that you get in touch with that by going to the core of your own being. And when you're at the core of your own being, you discover that the core of your own being is not limited physically to your physical dimensions. It's actually goes from the center of you outward infinitely. And it's an experience. It's hard to describe, because this is not in the world of words, and this is not in the words of theory. You actually have to sit down and become quiet and spend some time being as still as you can, going as deeply still as you can, seeing how long you can stay really still, and just feel what it feels like to be what you are, to be in your being. And so I spent some time doing that, and because of that, if you want to create a teachable field of health, you have to look at all of those pieces, because they all make a difference to health. So the idea, it's a book on human nature, and it's a book on the nature of health. And I call it Total Sexy Health, because each one of the 8 parts brings part of your sexy to you. Sexy meaning fully present, aware, noticeable, full on, maybe anything that touches the heart or is life affirming, that's sexy. I'm not talking about just sex. I'm talking about sexy, and we sell everything by sexy, right? Yep. Oh, yes. And so the word has a very wide definition, not in the dictionary, but in street use. So each one confers a part of your sexy to you. If you get out of line, that part of sexy goes away. If you get back in line, you get that part of sexy back. And if you're fully present in all of your being and your surroundings, that's what total sexy health is about.
Got it.
And then you give each part its due, because each one of those 8 parts is different in its nature and its function, needs a different kind of attention, goes off in a different way, and responds to a different kind of intervention. So you basically spend your life living fully present. And then what you're not, when you do that, you're not lost in thoughts in your head that make you blind and deaf, or that make you rigid and unable to respond to what life brings you.
Yeah, that is great. I will again link to that book in the show notes as well. Now, this brings me to the favorite question that I have for you, which is, what are your top 3 anti-aging tips for our listeners?
Well, for a guy like me who's talking about 8, the 8 key parts designed by health, I should get 8. But I tell you, the most important, honestly, we talk about working hard and playing hard, but we never talk about doing nothing hard. And when you work hard and play hard, you burn out. When you work hard and play hard and do nothing hard, you get balance. In the doing nothing is your rest and your recovery. And I would put that first of all the things to make it longer. There's research actually that when you go to the place, when you go inward in your awareness, you actually can reverse parts of aging. Obviously not forever. That's why there's no people who are 500 years old running around, right? And the body is a temporary condition. I call it a worthwhile but losing proposition. And so to give the body what it needs, in terms of not neglect it and not indulge it. So it'll serve you as long as possible. But that the purpose should be more thriving than surviving. Mm-hmm. And the thriving is in the internal part, the energy, because that energy is indestructible. The awareness is indestructible. Live forever, never die. They're so far beyond death. Something in you is so far beyond death that when you hang out in that place, death is not an issue. In fact, it's ecstatic. Death is ecstatic. When the body ends and our awareness goes from outside in the world and in our mind and in our body falls back into its source. It's an ecstatic process, except for the resistance we have because we've attached ourselves to so many things that we now have to let go of. But if you learn how to let go of them by doing some kind of inner self-knowledge practice, then when it comes to dying, you'll be okay with it, and then your kid will be okay with it, and then everybody will be okay with it, just because it isn't, it's a natural process. Yep. It's a natural process. You came out of somewhere and you go back to somewhere. So that, I would say, that's the first. When it comes to physical, the oils are the magic, simply because 99% of the population doesn't get enough of the right oils, but also less sugar, less carbs, less animal products. But the single most important in terms of anti-aging has to do getting oils with health in mind, with omega-3s and 6s in the right balance. And I would say the third one is, since you create your thoughts, create some really good ones. Like mine is 8 billion people could live their lives lit up from within, because the light's already there. It's just a matter of going into it rather than looking away from it. When we do that, we will feel so taken care of by life, because life takes perfect care of us 24/7, 365. Through all our dramas and traumas, life takes care of us. Get to know it. And out of that feeling, then when we feel that taken care of, we don't want to steal each other's stuff because we already have enough. Then we can live in harmony. And when we can live in harmony, it's very easy to make sure that everybody's basic needs are taken care of. Long-term, sustainable way. So I would say that's the third part, which is recognize that you create your thoughts, and your state of being creates your world. If you're in peace, you see that peace is everywhere. If you're in anger, you see enemies everywhere. If you're in fear, you see danger everywhere. So your state of being actually creates your world, and the same world will look different to different people depending on their different states of being. So cultivate that state of being where you're fully present in all of your being, and you will discover that the world is an amazing place and you are a magnificent being. So, and then you can rewrite your life and come up with new ideas about who you are. Somebody says you're ugly, say, no, I'm not ugly. I'm actually really beautiful. Right? If somebody puts you down, you don't take it on, because it's not true from your own experience. And from that experience, what thoughts you create, what beliefs you create. But more than, as much as possible, base your knowledge on your own experience of your deepest self. That's where all the
Got it. Thank you, Dr. Erasmus. Those are some really good tips. Where can our listeners find you online?
I have two websites. One is called UDO'sCHOICE.com. That's where my products are. I have another one called UDO'Erasmus.com. That's where Total Sexy Health and what I'm doing now in terms of the bigger picture is. I'm on Facebook under Udo's Choice Official and under Udo Erasmus. And I'm on Instagram. And, I'm not hard to find. If you look up Udo Erasmus on the internet, there's lots of ways to find me.
Got it. And I will link to all this information in the show notes, as well as to all of your books. Dr. Erasmus, thank you for being on the show.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You can find all the information we discussed in this episode and links to studies in the show notes at antiaginghacks.net. To make sure you get notified of new episodes, please subscribe to the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at antiaginghacks and on Facebook at facebook.com/antiaginghacks. And now for the disclaimers. This podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. Please seek the advice of your health professional for any health or medical conditions.